What to do if you have a large debt to the bank? The peculiarity of the crisis we are going through is an acute shortage of liquidity. Accordingly, the value of money as such will steadily increase. Therefore, if you have the opportunity to borrow from normal friends, safely occupy. Maybe this money will turn out to be vital for you, when there will no longer be an opportunity to borrow from friends, so it is better to let them stay with you. In general, holding on to money, even if it is vital that you give it away, is entirely justified in a narrow commercial sense. Although, it is quite unjustified morally strategy. However, practice shows that immoral actions pay off only in a very short term. This is what swindlers of all stripes and their ideologists pay the main attention to. In the long term, immoral actions are unprofitable. There are many explanations for this, from all of us known religious to quite pragmatic psychological ones. Accustomed to deceiving, sooner or later, you will relax and deceive not the one whom you can deceive because he cannot defend himself, but the one with whom it is absolutely impossible to do it. On the other hand, businessmen who did not throw their partners in catastrophic circumstances, but tried, if not to fulfill, then to settle their obligations. Such business people had tremendous respect and, accordingly, unparalleled business opportunities. Therefore, the maximum commercial benefit that you can derive from the situation is to try to roll over your debts by postponing payments or part of them to a later date, provided that you have a way of rational and completely risk-free use of the saved money. However, for this, the lender may, as a counter-service, quite reasonably ask you to increase the payments. And here you will have to consider yourself what is more profitable for you, of course, taking into account the accelerating rise in prices and the threat of depreciation of your currency. Therefore, if you do not succeed in postponing payments on favorable terms for you, and if you have the opportunity to return the money borrowed, return it calmly. It is only necessary to earn moral capital on this, trying to make sure that the creditor understands well how unprecedented your conscientiousness is in the context of the growing crisis. In conditions when few people pay, and how hard it was for you to return the money on time in a catastrophically worsening situation. If it is really hard for you to get the money back, or you simply do not have it and there is no one to re-borrow, then you will have to go to extremely unpleasant negotiations. Of course, for some time, depending on the individual characteristics of the lender, you can simply hide and evade the meeting, referring to family matters, illness, loss of a mobile phone, and so on. However, this cannot go too far because the lender may feel that you drive him by the nose and makes him an idiot. It will be extremely difficult for you to get from him the understanding and condescension you need. Of course, the course of negotiations depends on the person to whom you owe money. It is quite possible that he will not meet you halfway under any circumstances. If he is well connected in the power circles, it may be most prudent for you to simply try to hide and run. Including with your family, although this is an extremely bad way out. Strictly speaking, you cannot borrow from such people under any circumstances, and it is better to never deal with them at all. However, most people are still capable of negotiation. Your main task in these negotiations is to translate the discussion from a commercial format into a friendly one. Since the crisis and the general deterioration of the business environment, from a commercial point of view, cannot be recognized as a force majeure circumstance. But with a meaningful discussion of problems in the presence of friendly relations, they will certainly be recognized as such. Accordingly, you should initiate the meeting yourself. This will make a particularly positive impression if you have been avoiding her for some time before. At the meeting, you should directly and frankly explain your position, honestly describing what you counted on when you took the money, and why your hopes were not justified. You must speak concisely and clearly, without creating a feeling that playing for time in order not to cause in his address the negative reaction of one of the creditors. You should think through all possible questions in advance and be ready to answer them, even if they are unpleasant or touch on sensitive topics. If necessary, describe your sources of income and expenses that you cannot reduce, although this is possible only in relation to a bona fide partner. You must convincingly and with dignity show yourself for whom you, of course, really are, an honest person. Due to circumstances beyond your control, he found himself in a difficult situation, but doing everything to return money that does not belong to him. Attitude to circumstances beyond your control and the willingness to convincingly and in detail to prove this approach is fundamentally important. Circumstances beyond your control relieve you of a significant part of your guilt and sharply limit your liability. And, therefore, reduces the penalties that can be applied to you. It is useful to mention in passing that you have some kind of force support, for example, a relative in the police, a lawyer. Not focusing attention on this, that there was no sense of threat. Needless to say, if the creditor knows or can find out that this statement is not true, it should not be done. If the conversation has become really friendly or at least tolerant towards you, do not embellish your position so as not to disappoint the creditor during subsequent negotiations. Be sure to consider what the lender might be interested in. Before the meeting, work out the terms of debt restructuring or rollover that are both feasible for you and acceptable for him, and offer them. At the same time, think over what conditions may be the maximum permissible for you, that is, beyond what line you will not be able to retreat. Of course, do not agree to onerous, notoriously impossible demands, clearly pointing to the fact that they do not just ruin you, but also make the situation uncomfortable for both parties eternal. When faced with a threat, or a hint of it, ask directly if you are being threatened. Be prepared to explain that a threat is a manifestation of an unfriendly approach when you are not to blame for the current situation can undermine your sincere desire to pay off your debt. For example, due to the diversion of energy and money from making money for this payment to counter the threat. If this threat is illegal, you can turn to law enforcement agencies for protection, which gives you an additional argument in negotiations. In addition, in the event of an unfavorable development of events, a situation is quite possible when you simply will not have any other way out. Try to avoid documenting your commitments. But, if you are asked to write a voucher, do not evade. This will be regarded as an attempt to deceive and destroy your efforts to prove your good faith. At the same time, if you are not dictated to the text, in some cases you will be able to write the voucher in a vague form. The voucher may be, for example, payments terms and their amount, but will not provide for sanctions for delay. In this case, the court will set the interest at the level of the refinancing rate of the national bank of your country, which is significantly lower than any penalties. If you are in receipt, simply do not specify the passport data. Own and borrowers, the court will not automatically recognize your receipt as a debt obligation. Understanding this by the lender, which will arise as soon as he turns to lawyers, will give you at least gain in time. It is extremely useful to record all telephone conversations, especially with threats, and especially if collectors have been set on you, although the court may not accept them for consideration. Remember that no one has the right to demand a debt from those who are being treated in a hospital, minors, except for those officially recognized as fully capable, disabled people of Group I and incapacitated. Remember, the law is on your side. See you in the next videos. Will be a lot of useful information. In the next video, you will learn how to get rid of a loan during the crisis fast.